What was the most disturbing thing you saw in person? A prisoner with his throat cut and his lunch coming out. Yup, and this is as far down as I'm going on this thread. I saw a guy's leg shredded by recycling truck that didn't see him. It was something out of a human anatomy textbook. You could see every muscle and bone from thigh to shin. The poor dude was still alive in extreme pain. As the ambulance came to get him, he looked so pale and cold. I found out he died shortly after. A man that was pulled into a wood chipper. Arm and half of head gone before they got it shut down. How did he get pulled into a wood chipper? Wearing a hoodie and got it caught in it. Watched a woman get stabbed to death by her baby daddy in front of their kid. He said later he did it 'cause he didn't want her to take care of the kid. Happened right outside my school too. I went to high school with a girl whose dad strangled her mom to death in front of her when she a toddler. Years later, when she asked why he did it, her dad said that he was just sick of her crackhead mom and didn't want her taking care of his kids. So he murdered her and put his daughter in foster care for her whole life. He gets out of prison this year. I was no contact with my abusive addict mom for many years. She passed in 2020. A sheriff's deputy found her during a wellness check. It was declared that she had been dead for a couple of weeks in July heat with no utilities. My father and I drove to her house the day after they removed her body. You could smell the decomposition from a block away. She had canceled trash services and had 3+ years of garbage bags piled to the ceiling in her garage. There were rats running all over the house. 99.9% of our family pictures were pissed on or eaten by rats and not salvageable. Both of her toilets were out of order and full to the brim with crap. Everything I saw in her house was absolute nightmare fuel. An elderly man on a bike get hit by a truck. I had to hold his head together with my shirt to try and stop the bleeding until the ambulance came. I was waiting at a bus stop, and on the other side of the rather tall divider were 3 bikers waiting for the light behind a bus, at a major intersection. Moments later, another bus came up behind, but realized too late it had no brakes. Several people injured, but 2 of the 3 bikers were squished to pulp. One was thrown to the pavement on the far side of the road, and survived with injuries. I never dared cross the road and look on the other side of that divider. It was in the papers the next morning. Human body parts moments after they got hit by a semi-truck, an arm about 35 feet from the head. My father killed himself by stepping out in front of a semi-truck on the freeway this last summer. I feel horrible for the driver of that truck and I think about him all the time. Someone jumping off of a building. I'm haunted by the mental image of blood/cranial matter splattered around a very limp body. Oh geez. That would be so traumatizing. I take emergency phones calls from my state's ambulance service, Australia. The caller was the person whose car was hit by a person jumping off a multi-level car park at the hospital. Several years later, and I will never forget her screams, "We have to ask if they're, the patient, awake and breathing," and just her description was horrifying. She was severely traumatized in that moment, understandably. Even as the emergency operator, it's something that has stuck with me. Probably seeing the burn marks on a pediatric patient who was desperate for help due to persistent SA from a family member. Never been so pissed in my life at someone I had never met. Wish I could have broken the perpetrator's orbitals, so he could never look at another child the same way again. A person with half their head gone because of attempted suicide with a shotgun. Bottom half gone, I'm assuming? I saw a documentary about a girl who got facial reconstruction after blowing off her jaw. Must be horrifying to see. Unfortunately, it was the top half. Lived for a few hours before they passed. Imagine shooting yourself in the head and then living for another couple hours. I wonder if they felt anything during that time. Horrible. Was riding with my dad and siblings one morning on our way to school. There's a bridge we drive under every day. That morning we all saw a body hanging from that bridge. When we got home from school, the body was finally in the process of being taken down. So the body was hanging for another 6 to 8 hours and God knows how many hours before? That's fucked up. Motorcycle rider missing their head. Launched across highway, run over by numerous cars before traffic stopped. Head was removed with helmet. That's so messed up, I'm sorry. I think that would make me instantly vomit. For unfortunately seen death on the roads a few times. But what made this one different was that the rider sped past me right before it happened and I thought, idiot is wanting to die. 30 seconds later he was in opposite side of highway dead. About 8 years ago I working as a train conductor, my locomotive engineer and I hit a young woman with an 8,000-ton freight train traveling 40 miles per hour. After applying the emergency brakes, it was my job to get out and visually check to see if we indeed had an accident. I found her contorted body in seemingly impossible ways near the side of the tracks. I radioed 911 to my dispatcher and emergency services were immediately called. She unfortunately passed away not long after the ambulance arrived. One time I was having a sleepover at my friend's house, and she died in her sleep. Waking up and seeing her was pretty disturbing. Holy shit. I'm so sorry. How old were you guys? Was she ill? She was 17 and I was 15. About 2 weeks before I turned 16, she had epilepsy and had a grand mal seizure in the night. That's how a friend of mine died. He was about to turn 30 and looking forward to that party. My best friend and I were supposed to be pets/house sitting, and when we showed up on the first day, the owner, guy who hired us, and his brother were both dead in the house. There was a note, and it was ruled a murder-suicide. Younger brother showed up at the house in a drug-fueled rage and older brother didn't know it was him and shot him. Then when he realized who it was he wrote a note and killed himself. Your story made me think of this. A strange daughter of 20 years shows up one night, kills brother and mother. The father hears the shots and gets his gun. He kills his daughter and her husband. He didn't recognize her and just thought it was random violence. Cops had to tell him it was his estranged daughter. The daughter also had gasoline to torch the house after. Was walking through a city with a friend when we saw a guy on a bike, no helmet, come down a steep street right in front of us. Something made his bike flip and he went headfirst onto the stone cobble street. The cracking noise and the amount of blood was something I'm not going to forget anytime soon. Ambulance and so on showed up pretty fast, but I have no idea if he survived. I'd like to think so, but there was so much blood on the street I don't know if I can believe it. Sounds similar to what happened to me. I don't remember any of that morning but pieced it together after. At 16 years old, doing my morning paper round, I went off the curb and onto the road as was my normal route. As I lifted off, the front suspension fell out of the forks and the front wheel went out from under me, hit the road with pure metal, proceeded to go face first into the road. I got airlifted and sent to the hospital, woke up a few times in the scanner and thankfully have no real injuries other than a massive Harry Potter-style scar. My face was not a pretty sight and I still have the photos. Driving in Washington State. Someone in a car the size of a Toyota Corolla went head-on with a semi. There were body parts and goo all over the road, no survivors in the car. They had to get the jaws of life out to get enough remains to have something to bury. Almost 25 years later, seeing a severed hand being picked up by EMS still haunts me. Truck driving in general sounds like a job that people don't lend nearly enough credit when it comes to fucked up jobs. It seems like all of them have seen scores of people die, and I'm sure a lot of them were involved in accidents like that one too. Doctors doing CPR in vain on my 8-day-old, 1 pound 15-ounce daughter. The palm of their hands were bigger than her little body. That image will never leave my mind. NICU nurse here, we never forget either. I'm very sorry for your loss. I lost a son in the NICU. Thank you for doing a job I could never imagine bearing the weight of. One of my patients was not a fan of good hygiene. She had inverted nipples and a filthy, stinky plug made out of dirt and sweat, and old skin, etc. came out when pulling back her boobs to clean in the nipples. I wish I didn't know how to read.